When a man in plain dark jeans and worn-out boots walked into one of the most expensive car showrooms in all of Los Angeles, nobody paid much attention to him. He wasn't loud, he wasn't flashy. He didn't walk in with bodyguards or an assistant or a single piece of jewelry on his body. He just walked quietly through the glass doors, stopped in front of a bright orange supercar worth $347,000, and placed his hand gently on the hood. That's when a young salesman walked over, looked him up and down, and said something that you will not believe. He told him he was too old for the car. He actually said that. What the salesman did not know, what nobody in that showroom knew yet, was that the man standing in those worn boots had just driven himself there alone, with enough cash in his account to buy every single car in that building. His name was Keanu Reeves, and buying the car was not even the most important thing he did that morning. Because somewhere in the back of that showroom, a 61-year-old janitor named Elias was pushing a mop across the floor. He had worked hard his whole life. He had lost the most important person he had ever loved. And every single morning, for 22 years, he reached into his breast pocket and touched a tiny piece of paper that he carried everywhere he went. He had no idea that this Tuesday morning was about to change every single thing. He had no idea that Keanu Reeves had not just come there for a car. He had come there for him. What happens next? What Keanu does, what Elias is carrying in that pocket, and the connection between these two men that nobody saw coming is one of the most quietly beautiful things you will ever hear. Stay with us for the whole video, because the ending will stop you completely. Here is what happened. On a Tuesday morning in late September 2023, a man walked through the glass doors of McLaren Beverly Hills on Beverly Boulevard in Los Angeles, California. He wore no designer clothes, no expensive watch, no sunglasses pulled low to hide a famous face. Just dark jeans, a plain black shirt, and a pair of scuffed leather boots that looked like they had walked 1,000 roads and were in no hurry to stop. The showroom was the kind of place that made you feel slightly underdressed just by standing near it. Bright white lights dropped from the ceiling like small suns. When the floors were so clean they looked like still water. And arranged across that floor like sculptures in a museum that nobody was allowed to touch, sat some of the most beautiful cars ever built by human hands. Orange paint, silver curves, engines tucked beneath hoods like sleeping hearts. Everything in that room cost more than most people earned in 10 years. A young salesman named Derek Foss stood near the front desk. Derek was 26 years old, sharp-dressed, and only 4 months into the job. He had been trained well. He knew the specs of every car in that showroom. He knew the financing options, the insurance packages, the names of the most important clients. He also knew, because every salesman in every luxury dealership in Los Angeles knows this, how to read a customer in the first 10 seconds. When he looked at the man who had just walked in, he made his decision quickly. The man appeared to be in his late 50s. Salt and pepper hair, a little long, falling casually around his ears. A quiet face. Not unfriendly, just still. The kind of face that has seen enough of the world to stop being impressed by most of it. He moved slowly and without any urgency, his hands loose at his sides, his eyes moving calmly around the room. He stopped in front of a McLaren 720S Spider. Ventura Orange. A car with a sticker price of $347,500. He placed one hand gently on the hood. Not possessively, almost reverently. The way a person touches something they have admired for a long time from a distance. Derek smoothed his jacket and walked over. "Can I help you?" he asked. His smile was practiced and polished, all landing somewhere between welcoming and cautious. The man looked up. His eyes were calm and dark. "I'd love to take this one for a test drive," he said. Derek looked him over one more time. The worn boots, the plain shirt, the quiet face that was not young. "I'm sorry," Derek said, keeping his voice smooth and low. "Our test drives are really reserved for serious buyers, and honestly..." He paused just long enough to seem polite about it. "This particular model tends to suit a younger driver." The man didn't argue. Didn't tighten his jaw or cross his arms or do any of the things that people do when they are quietly furious. He simply smiled. "I understand," he said. "I'll wait." Derek walked back to his desk, entirely certain the man would be gone within 5 minutes. He was not gone in 5 minutes. And he stood beside that orange McLaren for 20 minutes without moving, patient and still. His hands folded in front of him, looking at the car the way you look at something, or someone, that you have never stopped loving. And then Gloria Marsh walked out of the back office, glanced across the showroom floor, and felt the color drain slowly from her face. She crossed to Derek in 6 quick steps and dropped her voice to a whisper. "That's Keanu Reeves." Derek looked at the man by the orange car, then back at Gloria, then back at the man. And something cold and educational moved through his chest. But here is the thing that none of them understood yet. Not Derek, not Gloria, not even Keanu Reeves himself. He had not come to Beverly Hills that morning only for the car. He had come for someone else. And at the far end of the showroom was a man named Elias Vega was pushing a mop slowly across the polished floor, completely unaware that his name was already written, without either of them knowing it, in the middle of this story. In the breast pocket of Elias's work shirt, pressed flat and worn soft against his chest, was a small piece of paper. He touched it every single morning. He had touched it every morning for 22 years. Elias Vega was 61 years old. He had worked as a janitor for most of his adult life. Not because he had no dreams, he had plenty of those. But life, as it often does, had taken its own direction. Quietly, without asking permission, the way rivers change course after a heavy rain. He grew up in Boyle Heights, a neighborhood on the east side of Los Angeles. A small house with a yellow front door on a street where the neighbors knew your name, and the smell of someone's dinner came through the window every evening like a greeting. His mother, Carmen, worked 6 days a week at a laundromat on First Street. His father, Rodrigo, repaired shoes from a tiny shop on Cesar Chavez Avenue. His hands always stained dark at the creases no matter how hard he scrubbed them. They were not rich, but the house was full. Full of music on Friday nights. Full of food that stretched further than it should have. Full of loud arguments and louder laughter, and the particular kind of love that does not announce itself because it does not need to. Elias had wanted to be a mechanic. He loved engines the way some boys love baseball cards or comic books. Completely, almost irrationally, in a way that made his whole face change when he talked about it. He could hear a car idling from half a block away and tell you without looking whether the timing was off. As a teenager, he used to climb the chain-link fence of the salvage yard on Lorena Street on Saturday mornings and spend entire days in there alone, pulling apart old gearboxes and carburetors just to understand how the pieces spoke to each other. He had a plan: save money, take night classes, open his own shop someday. He had even picked the name, Vega's Garage. He wrote it once on the back of a paper napkin in careful block letters, the way you write something you want to remember. He folded it into his wallet and told himself it was just a matter of time. But at 19, he married his high school sweetheart Rosa, and at 20, he became a father, and his son's name was Tomas. Tomas came into the world on a Sunday afternoon in July of 1983, already making noise, already demanding attention, already taking up more space than seemed possible for something so small. He had Elias's dark, serious eyes and Rosa's smile, the one that started slow and then broke across her face like something she had been trying to hold back and simply could not. Elias worked wherever he could, cleaning office buildings downtown, mopping the long corridors of Cedars-Sinai Medical Center at night, sweeping out parking structures in Hollywood before the city woke up. He told himself it was temporary, that Vega's Garage was still coming, that the napkin in his wallet still meant something. He kept the napkin there for years. Tomas grew up into a boy who was funny without trying to be, and bright in the way that quiet children sometimes are. Absorbing everything, forgetting nothing. His greatest love, from the time he was old enough to sit still in the dark, was movies. He would save the money he earned mowing neighbors' lawns and drag Elias to the theater on weekends, already talking about the film before they had even found their seats. Elias would sit beside him, bone-tired from the week, and feel the tiredness lift somewhere between the opening credits and the first 20 minutes. That was what Thomas did to a room, to a person. He made the wait go somewhere else for a while. In the summer of 1994, Thomas was 11 years old. He burst through the front door on a Friday evening in July with a look on his face that meant there was absolutely no point in saying no to whatever came next. "Papa," he said, breathless, "there is a movie about a bus. The bus cannot slow down or it will explode. We have to go right now." Elias looked at his son. He put down his dinner. And he went. They took the bus to the Mon Chinese Theater on Hollywood Boulevard, the famous one with the handprints in the cement outside, where Tomasz always stopped and pressed his small palms into the molds left by people he had only ever seen on screen. It was a Friday evening in July 1994, and the line stretched halfway down the block, and Tomasz stood in it talking without pause, describing the trailer he had seen, acting out the parts he already knew, his hands moving the whole time. The movie was called Speed, and Elias sat beside his son in the dark and watched a man named Jack Traven, played by an actor named Keanu Reeves, sprint through chaos with nothing but nerve and a refusal to quit. A city bus rigged to explode. Innocent people trapped inside. One man holding the whole impossible thing together through pure stubborn will. For 2 hours, Elias did not think about money. He did not think about the laundry piling up at home, or the electric bill sitting on the kitchen counter, or the fact that his back had been hurting since Wednesday. He laughed, loudly, in the unselfconscious way that had become rare for him. The way you laugh when you have forgotten, just for a moment, to be tired. Tomas laughed beside him, their shoulders touching in the narrow seats. When it was over and the lights came back up, Tomas sat completely still for a few seconds, which was unusual for him. Then he turned to his father with those dark, serious eyes and said very simply, "That was the best thing I have ever seen." They walked out into the warm Hollywood night. At the door, Tomas held onto his ticket stub. He turned it over in his fingers, thinking. Then he took the small pencil he always kept in his jacket pocket, the one he used to keep score during card games, and wrote something on the back in his careful, slightly crooked handwriting. He pressed the stub into his father's hand. "Tonight was good." Elias read it. He looked at his son. Tomas was already moving ahead down the boulevard, his arms out at his sides like an airplane, weaving between the other people coming out of the theater, laughing at nothing in particular. Elias folded the stub and put it in his breast pocket. He did not know, standing there on Hollywood Boulevard on that warm Friday night, that he would keep it there for the rest of his life. He did not know that 2 years later, in the summer of 1996, Tomas would be riding his bicycle home from a friend's house on Cesar Chavez Avenue, the same street where his grandfather had once fixed shoes, when a car would come through an intersection too fast, too wide, without stopping. Tomas was 13 years old. He did not survive. And Elias Vega, who had held everything together through years of hard work and quiet struggle, found that this was the one thing he could not hold. He kept working, because there was nothing else to do. He kept touching the stub every morning because it was the last thing his son had placed in his hands. And on a Tuesday morning in September 2023, he was pushing a mop across the floor of McLaren Beverly Hills when a man in worn boots walked through the front door. A man whose face Elias knew, without yet knowing why it mattered. Gloria Marsh had worked at McLaren Beverly Hills for 9 years. She was 53 years old, composed in the way that only comes from having handled genuinely difficult situations with grace so many times that it becomes simply who you are. She had sold cars to professional athletes who paid without blinking, to tech executives who arrived with assistants and left with two, to celebrities who wore baseball caps and pretended they weren't who they were, and whom she pretended not to recognize because that was the kindness the situation required. She was very good at her job, and she was very good at faces. Now, when she walked out of the back office that morning with a coffee in one hand and a folder of client documents in the other, she looked across the showroom floor the way she always did. A quick, professional sweep, taking inventory of the room in a single glance. She saw the orange McLaren 720S Spider. She saw the man standing beside it. She stopped walking. The coffee stayed in her hand. The folder stayed in her other hand. But everything else in her body went completely still, the way things go still just before something important happens. She knew that face. She had known it for 30 years, the way most people did, from screens, from posters, from the particular quality of stillness he carried that made him look the same in real life as he did in photographs, which almost nobody did. Now she crossed the showroom in a straight line toward Derek. "That's Keanu Reeves," she said. Her voice dropped low and level. Derek turned slowly. He looked at the man by the orange car. He looked back at Gloria. A complicated series of realizations moved across his young face in quick succession. Recognition, then confusion, then the specific and unpleasant feeling of understanding exactly what you have just done and being completely unable to undo it. "I told him," Derek started. "I know what you told him," Gloria said. Not unkindly, but firmly. She handed Derek her folder, straightened her jacket, and walked across the floor toward Keanu Reeves with her hand already extended. "Mr. Reeves," she said quietly. "I'm Gloria Marsh. I sincerely apologize for any confusion. Please allow me to take care of you personally today." Keanu turned from the car and shook her hand. His grip was unhurried and warm. He was smiling. And it was a real smile, not performed, not assembled for the occasion. The kind of smile that lives at the eyes before it reaches the mouth. "Nothing to apologize for," he said. He was doing his job. He meant it completely. There was no edge underneath the words, no politeness covering something harder. Gloria had spent 9 years reading people across a sales desk, and she was certain. The man was not quietly angry. He was simply fine. She walked him through the 72OS Spider with the full attention the car deserved. Keanu listened the way people listen when they are genuinely interested, not nodding along politely, but asking questions that showed he had already read everything available and wanted to go one layer deeper. He knew the engine configuration. He asked about the hydraulic suspension. He wanted to know how the car behaved in the transition between normal and sport mode on a surface with uneven grip. Derek hovered at the edges, folder in hand, looking for a moment to say something. Keanu gave him one. "Mr. Reeves, I really want to—" "You're good," Keanu said. Calm and complete, like a door gently closed. He turned back to Gloria without another beat. At the far end of the showroom, Elias had paused his mopping. Not because anything had called his attention, not because he had heard his name or felt someone looking at him, but because the feeling that had been sitting in his chest since early that morning, and the quiet, the unnameable feeling that something about this Tuesday was different, had grown slightly louder. He pressed his hand flat against his breast pocket. The ticket stub pressed back, thin and soft, the way it always did. He picked up his mop, and then he heard footsteps moving across the polished floor. Slow and unhurried, coming in his direction. He did not look up immediately, but when he did, the man walking toward him stopped and looked directly at him. Not through him. At him. Not the way that famous people sometimes look at the people who clean their spaces. A brief, obligatory acknowledgement, polite enough to seem decent, brief enough to mean nothing. This was different. This was the look of a man who had noticed something, who had stopped mid-thought because something in front of him had snagged on something inside him. You know the way a piece of thread catches on a rough edge without either surface meaning to. Elias held the eye contact for a moment. Then he nodded politely, the way he always did with customers, and looked back down at his mop. When he looked up again a few seconds later, the man was gone. Back across the room. Standing at Gloria's desk, sitting down in the chair across from her. Elias watched him for just a moment longer. Then he pushed his mop bucket toward the far wall and went back to work. Across the showroom, Keanu Reeves sat forward in the chair with his elbows resting on his knees and said 4 words that made Gloria's professional composure flicker just slightly at the edges. "I'll take the orange one." Gloria straightened. You'd like to arrange a test drive first, of course, right? We can schedule something for later this week. You can, or even this afternoon if... No test drive, Keanu said. I'll take it today. Gloria looked at him carefully. In 9 years, she had heard urgency at that desk, and impulse, and the particular bravado of people who wanted to seem like the kind of person who bought a supercar without thinking twice. This was none of those things. This was settled. This was a decision that had already been made somewhere else, at some earlier time, and today was simply the day it was being carried out. Of course, she said. And will you be financing or... Cash, Keanu said. The McLaren 720S Spider on the showroom floor, Ventura orange with carbon fiber interior trim, an upgraded Bowers & Wilkins audio system, and the full carbon fiber exterior package was priced that morning at $347,500. Keanu Reeves paid for it in full. He sat at Gloria's desk for 40 minutes, calm and unhurried, working through every page of documentation with the careful attention of a man who does not sign things he has not read. He was polite to every person who came near him. He thanked the finance manager by name after she introduced herself. When someone brought him water, he said thank you in a way that made it sound like he meant it specifically, not generally. Derek Foss appeared twice at the edge of the desk, working up to something. The second time, Keanu looked at him with an expression that was neither cold nor dismissive, but simply complete. I promise you I'm fine, Keanu said. Stop carrying it. Derek nodded. He stepped back. Something in his shoulders dropped, not in defeat, but in the specific relief of being genuinely forgiven by someone who had every right to make it harder. When the last page was signed, Gloria gathered the documents into a neat stack and placed the key fob on the desk between them. It was a small thing. Matte black. The McLaren logo in the center. $347,500, reduced to an object that fit in a closed fist. Gloria slid it toward him. Keanu looked at it. He did not pick it up. He sat quietly for a long moment, his eyes on the key, his hand still in his lap. Then he lifted his gaze slowly across the showroom. Past the other cars, past Derek standing near the wall, all the way to the far end of the room, where Elias Vega was wringing out his mop with both hands, his back turned, completely unaware that anyone was looking at him. Gloria, Keanu said, without moving his eyes from Elias. What's that man's name? Gloria followed his gaze. That's Elias, she said. He's been with us 3 years. Does he have family? Keanu asked. Gloria was quiet for a moment. She thought about what she knew and what she had only sensed, and the particular way Elias sometimes went still, near the cars when he thought nobody was watching. I believe he lost his son, she said carefully. A long time ago. He doesn't talk about it, but I know he lives alone. Keanu said nothing. He picked up the key fob. He stood up. He held the key fob loosely in his right hand and walked away from Gloria's desk without explaining where he was going. Gloria watched him but did not follow. She understood, in the instinctive way that perceptive people sometimes understand things before they can articulate them, that what was about to happen did not need an audience. It did not need her presence or Derek's or anyone else's. She stayed at her desk. Derek stayed at the wall. The showroom went quietly about itself. The hum of the air conditioning, the distant sound of traffic on Beverly Boulevard, the soft mechanical breathing of expensive machines sitting still under bright lights. Keanu walked across the polished floor slowly. His boots made a soft, even sound with each step. He moved the way he always moved in real life, without performance, without the physical self-consciousness of someone who knows they are being watched. Just a man crossing a room. Elias was thinking about what he needed from the grocery store. Bread. Yet he was nearly out of bread, and the coffee was getting low. He had been meaning to stop at the little market on Alvarado Street on his way home, the one run by the older Vietnamese couple who always had the good pan dulce near the register, the kind his mother used to bring home on Sundays wrapped in white paper. He was thinking about this, and about bread and coffee and pan dulce, when he heard someone say his name. Not loudly, just clearly. Elias? He turned around. The man was standing 4 feet away. Dark jeans, plain black shirt, worn boots. The key fob held loosely at his side. Elias's brain moved slowly through what his eyes were telling it. The face in front of him was familiar in the deep, layered way that certain faces are. Faces you have seen in so many places across so many years, that they have become part of the furniture of your inner life without you ever making a conscious decision to let them in. He knew this face. He knew it from a Friday night in July 1994, blown up large across a screen in the dark, running towards something dangerous without slowing down. He knew it from 100 other screens across 30 years. But knowing a face and having that face standing 4 feet away from you, saying your name are two entirely different experiences, and Elias's body had not yet caught up with either of them. "Are you Elias?" the man asked. "Yes," Elias said. His voice came out steady, which surprised him. "My name is Keanu," the man said. He did not offer a last name. He did not need to. He took one step forward and held out the key fob. "I just bought that orange car," he said, in tilting his head gently toward the McLaren 720S Spider, glowing under the showroom lights. "And I would like you to have it." The words landed in the room like something dropped from a great height. Elias did not speak, because there was simply nothing in him, no word, no sound, no breath that felt adequate, to answer what had just been said. Keanu moved forward and took Elias's free hand in both of his. He placed the key fob in the center of Elias's palm. He closed Elias's fingers around it, one by one, gently, the way you close a child's hand around something small and important, so it will not be dropped. "It's yours," he said. "Gloria will have the paperwork in your name by tomorrow morning." Elias looked down at his own closed hand. He looked up. "Why?" he whispered. And Keanu smiled. The particular smile of a man who has known real grief and real loss, and has come out the other side of both, not harder, but quieter, and more certain about the few things that actually matter. "Because," he said, "I think something good has been a long time coming for you." He paused. His eyes stayed steady on Elias's face. "And because—" He stopped. Something moved briefly across his expression. A flicker of something private. Something that belonged to a place inside him that he did not open for showrooms or cameras or anyone watching. He shook his head slightly as if deciding to keep that part where it lived. "Just take care of it," he said. He placed his hand on Elias's shoulder. Not a pat, not a gesture. A real and solid pressure that said, without any words at all, "I see you. I see that you are here. I see that you have been here carrying this for a very long time." Then he lifted his hand. He nodded once. He turned and walked back across the showroom toward the exit, unhurried, his hands back in his pockets. He stopped briefly near Derek Foss. He looked at the young man for a moment. "Be kind to people," he said quietly. "That's really all there is." Then he walked out through the glass doors into the September sunlight. He got into a plain, dark sedan parked at the curb. Not a supercar, not a statement, just a car, and drove away. The showroom was completely silent. Elias stood alone in the middle of the polished floor. A mop in one hand, a key fob worth $347,500 in the other. Tears moving down his face without him having made any decision to cry. Slowly, with the hand that held the key, he reached up toward his breast pocket. His fingers closed around something small and worn and soft. He pulled it out. And what he was holding, and what had been pressed against his heart every single morning for 22 years, is the part of this story that will stop you completely. It was a movie ticket stub, small, rectangular, faded to the color of old cream, its edges worn as soft as fabric, from being folded and unfolded so many times across so many years that it had stopped being paper and become something else entirely. something closer to skin. The printed text had nearly surrendered to time, bleached pale by 2 decades of being carried against a warm body through summer heat and winter cold, and every ordinary and devastating day in between. But if you held it carefully in the right light, you could still read the single word printed across the top: speed. And below that, in the pencil handwriting of an 11-year-old boy, slightly crooked, carefully formed, pressed hard enough into the paper that the indentation had outlasted the graphite itself. 4 small words. Tonight was good. Elias stood in the middle of that gleaming showroom and looked at what his son had placed in his hands on a warm Friday night in July 1994, outside a theater on Hollywood Boulevard, before running ahead down the boulevard with his arms spread wide like he was already flying. And he wept. Not quietly, not carefully, not in the controlled, apologetic way that grown men who have spent decades being strong in public sometimes allow themselves. He wept the way a person weeps when something that has been locked for a very long time is finally, unexpectedly opened. Deep and real and long overdue. The kind of grief that does not embarrass itself because it is too honest to care about being seen. Gloria came to him. She placed her hand on his arm and stood beside him and said nothing at all, because she understood without being told that there were no words that belonged in this moment. Some moments are too large for language. You simply stand beside them. Derek Foss stood back near the wall with his arms at his sides and his eyes cast down. He was 26 years old. He had come to work that morning believing he understood how to read a room, how to read a person, how to know in 10 seconds who mattered and who did not. He was not that person anymore. Something had been quietly and permanently rearranged inside him. And he was still trying to understand the shape of what remained. Slowly, the crying stopped. Elias wiped his face with the back of his hand. He took one long breath. Then another. He looked down at the ticket stub lying in his open palm. He looked across the showroom at the McLaren 720S Spider, sitting under the lights in its Ventura orange paint. Vivid and alive and impossible. The most beautiful thing that had ever existed in any space Elias Vega had ever occupied. A car built entirely around the idea of speed. Bought and paid for and handed over freely by the very man who had once played Jack Traven, who had once held a speeding bus together through sheer refusal to quit. On a screen in the dark while a tired father sat beside his 11-year-old son and forgot for 2 hours every hard thing he was carrying. Off the same boy who had pressed a ticket stub into that father's hand outside the theater door. The same ticket stub that was now lying in that father's palm inside a McLaren showroom, 29 years later, on a Tuesday morning that had begun like every other Tuesday morning, and then quietly became the most important day of his life. Elias pressed the stub back against his heart. He closed his eyes. "Okay, mijo," he said, so quietly that only the room heard it. "Okay." He opened his eyes. He looked at the key fob in his other hand. He pressed the button. Across the showroom, the McLaren 720S Spider responded with a sound that was barely a sound at all. A deep, smooth, velvet exhale, like something magnificent breathing for the first time. The doors unlatched with a soft, precise click. Elias walked toward it, slowly, in the way he had always moved around those cars. Carefully, respectfully, with the reverence of a man who understood that beautiful things deserve to be approached with intention. He opened the driver's door. He sat down. The seat received him completely. Low and firm and exact, shaped as though it had been waiting for a specific person and had simply been patient about it. He did not start the engine. He did not do anything. He sat with both hands resting on the steering wheel, and the ticket stub pressed flat over his heart, and the September morning moving quietly outside the glass walls of the showroom. The city going about its ordinary, indifferent, endless business all around him, entirely unaware that something extraordinary had just happened inside this room. To this man, on this Tuesday, Elias Vega, 61 years old, a son of Carmen and Rodrigo, father of Tomas, a man who had mopped floors and swallowed grief and pressed a piece of paper against his chest every morning for 22 years so that the last ordinary night he had spent with his son would never be completely gone. He sat inside a $347,000 supercar and felt, moving through him slowly like light through a curtained window, something he had nearly forgotten the name of. Hope. Not the desperate kind. Not the kind that asks for things. The quiet kind. The kind that simply notices that the world, despite every reason it has given you to stop believing this, still has the capacity to do something so unexpected and so generous that it can only mean one thing. That goodness is still out there, still moving through ordinary Tuesdays, and still finding the right pockets to land in. Keanu Reeves was told he was too old to test drive a supercar. He paid cash. He gave the keys to the janitor, and a boy named Tomas, who loved movies and saved his lawn mowing money, and wrote 4 words in pencil on the back of a ticket stub so his father would remember a good night. That boy got to be part of something beautiful one final time. Tonight was good. It still was. If this story moved you even a little, drop a comment right now and tell us where you're listening from. We have people watching from living rooms and late-night kitchens and early morning commutes all around the world, and every single location in the comments makes this community more real. So tell us your city, your country, wherever you are. We genuinely want to know. And if you believe that kindness like this deserves to travel further than one showroom in Los Angeles, if you think more people should be reminded that quiet goodness still exists in this world, then hit the like button right now. It takes 1 second, but it tells the world that stories like this one matter. Subscribe to this channel so you never miss the next one. Because we find these stories, the real ones, the ones with no cameras and no red carpets and no applause, and we bring them to you. Stories about ordinary Tuesdays that became something extraordinary. Stories that remind you that people are still capable of doing something so unexpected and so generous that it makes the whole world feel a little lighter. 1 like, 1 subscribe, 1 share with someone who needs to hear something good today. That is how kindness spreads. And now, click on the video appearing on your screen right now, because the next story is already waiting for you. And something tells us you are not going to want to miss it.